Ludlow Street, Lower East Side, New York City. A little past 10 o'clock at night. Saturday, August the 8th, 1896. A garment presser's family, the kind of household the 10th Ward tenement records document by the thousand, is carrying a mattress up 3 flights of stairs. Not down. Up. The father has the front end, the oldest boy has the back, and the mother is behind them with 2 pillows and a jug of water, because whatever happens on the roof tonight, nobody is coming back down for anything. It is the 5th night of the heat wave. The thermometer at the Weather Bureau downtown has not dropped below the high 70s after dark in 5 days, and that is the reading in the open air, on an instrument, in the shade. The rear bedroom this family has just abandoned is not the open air. It is a room with one window opening onto an air shaft, in a brick building that has been drinking the sun since 5 o'clock that morning, on a block where the census takers had counted people at a density that made this neighborhood one of the most crowded places on the surface of the earth. The presser worked today. He will work Monday. The shop does not close for weather, and the pressing irons do not run cold. What he can control is the next 8 hours, and the next 8 hours are a physics problem. The roof is the only surface of this building that faces the sky instead of another wall. They are not the first family on the stairs tonight. They will not be the last. By midnight the roof of this tenement will hold more sleepers than any single floor below it. So begin with the question the mattress is asking. What exactly had this building been doing to its own tenants all day, and why was the top of it, 6 stories above the street, the only part of it a family could survive a night in? What the building had been doing all day was simple, and it was merciless. Brick is thermal mass. It absorbs heat slowly and it releases heat slowly. On a normal summer day that arrangement is almost a kindness. The walls take the afternoon sun so the rooms don't have to, and the night carries the heat away before morning. The system depends entirely on the night doing its job. In August 1896, the night stopped doing its job. For 10 days, roughly the 4th through the 13th, the temperature ran into the 90s by day, the humidity sat on the city like a wet coat, and, this is the part that killed people, it barely cooled after dark. The brick took on heat faster than it could shed it. Each day started warmer than the last, deep in the walls. By the 5th day, a tenement on Ludlow Street was not a building standing in the heat. It was an oven with a 10-day fire in it, and estimates from the period put the worst interior rooms near 120 degrees. And the architecture decided who got the worst of it. The front rooms faced the street and had real windows. The rear rooms faced the air shaft, a gap between buildings sometimes narrow enough to touch both walls, which delivered no breeze, held the smell of every kitchen on the shaft, and by August was itself a column of warm air. Top floors sat directly under a tar roof that had been in the sun since dawn. The cheapest rooms in the building were the hottest rooms in the building, which is another way of saying the building charged the poorest tenants in degrees. Before we continue, if this kind of documentation is what you have been looking for, consider subscribing. Every video on this channel goes into one specific element of American life in the heat before air conditioning came home: the fan, the iceman, the movie theater at 9 o'clock, the front stoop at midnight, the roof with the mattresses on it, and what each of these things meant for the specific people who organized their summers around them. Not nostalgia for the front porch. The documented physical reality of a heat problem that some households managed with a wet sheet and a rooftop, and others did not survive. What the roof gave the family on Ludlow Street, 10 degrees and a moving breath of air that the rear bedroom 3 floors below was never built to provide, and which, 60 years later, a humming box in the window would finally make it unnecessary to climb for. And if you lived this, or your family did, put it in the comments. Did your family ever carry a mattress up to the roof, or out the fire escape window? Which floor were they on, and who slept outside first? Next on this channel, the iceman, the horse, the tongs, and the trade that carried the cold up 4 flights before the machines came. Back to the 4th floor. So the building was an oven, and the family knew it. The question is what the city did about the people inside the ovens. Who died in August 1896, and who had already left town before the dying started. Before you can understand who died in August 1896, you need to understand what the heat wave looked like from 2 different addresses in the same city. From Newport, from Saratoga, from the Long Island shore, it looked like an inconvenience in the newspapers. The households that could leave New York in August had already left. That was what August was for, if you had the money. The heat wave did not chase them. It never reached them. From the 10th Ward, it looked like this. Roughly 1,300 people died in New York City over those 10 days, a toll historians place above the Great Chicago Fire and above the draft riots. The dead were not distributed across the city. They were concentrated where the brick was densest, where the rooms were smallest, and where the work did not stop. Laborers died on the job, men digging trenches, hauling freight, working iron, because a day not worked was a day not paid, and the wage was somewhere around $1.50. The heat took them at the shovel and it took them at night in the rear rooms. And it took the infants. In the tenement wards, the smallest coffins were the most numerous. A baby in a rear room off an air shaft, in the fifth night of unbroken heat, in an era before refrigerated milk reliably reached the poor, the period record is unambiguous about what that combination did. Even the horses tell you what the streets were. Roughly 1,000 of them died in harness during the wave, and the carcasses lay where they fell, some for days, because the removal service was as overwhelmed as the morgue. A child on Ludlow Street that week learned to cross the street around them. So the city had a mortality map, and it looked exactly like the rent map. But the family on the roof was not reading maps. They were solving tonight. And there was one substance in the city, sold off the back of a wagon, every morning, on every block, that could actually make a room survivable. Why couldn't they afford it? So the building was an oven, and the family knew it. The question is what the city did about the people inside the ovens. Who died in August 1896, and who had already left town before the dying started. The ice existed. That is the detail that makes August 1896 hard to look at. This was not a city without cold. New York had one of the largest ice trades on Earth, blocks cut from the Hudson and from Maine ponds in winter, stored in insulated ice houses, moved by barge and wagon, and sold every morning off the tailgate of an ice cart on nearly every block of the Lower East Side. The cold was 200 feet from the family on the roof. It came by horse, on a schedule. What the family did not have was the margin. Ice was sold by the piece, and a working household bought it in small quantities, enough for the ice box, enough to keep the milk from turning, when they bought it at all. Period accounts of comparable tenement households describe the arithmetic plainly. On a laborer's wage of roughly $1.50 a day, with rent due and 6 people eating, ice was not a staple. It was a decision. In a heat wave, when demand surged and the pieces the poor could afford got smaller for the same nickel, the decision got harder exactly when the need got desperate. And ice, in that room, was not a comfort item. It was medicine. A chunk of ice wrapped in a rag on an infant's body, a block in a basin in front of the one window, ice chips in the water jug that came up to the roof. The doctors making tenement calls that week prescribed it constantly, to households that could not fill the prescription. So hold the picture, the cold moving through the streets every morning, past the buildings where people were dying of heat, priced just above the reach of the people dying. The city watched that arrangement for over a week and did nothing about it. Which raises the question the family solved with their legs instead of their nickels. If you could not buy the cold, where in the city could you walk to it? What did the night geography of free relief actually look like? If you could not buy the cold, you walked to whatever the city gave away, and in 1896 the city gave away 3 things: the parks, the piers, and the river itself. The parks first. Sleeping in a public park was, in ordinary times, a matter for the police. During the wave, the police stopped enforcing it, the parks filled at nightfall with families on blankets, and the department looked the other way, because the alternative to the grass was the rear bedroom, and the rear bedroom was killing people. That quiet suspension of an ordinance was, in its way, the first official admission that the housing itself was the emergency. Then the piers. The recreation piers and the working docks along the East River caught whatever breeze the water offered, and by the second week they held sleepers by the hundred. The river gave, and the river took. The period record documents men and boys who went off the piers to cool themselves in the dark and did not come back up. Drowning became one of the heat wave's official causes of death. And the heights had their own tax. The roof and the fire escape saved uncounted lives that August, and the coroner's lists document the ones the arrangement cost: sleepers who shifted in the night on a narrow iron platform or an unrailed roof edge, and fell. The family on Ludlow Street knew those stories. They put the children on the inside, against the chimney, away from the edge. That placement, child, parent, edge, was the safety engineering of 1896, and every family on the roof had worked it out independently. Free relief, in other words, was real, and every piece of it carried a price the paid relief did not: distance, danger, or both. Which is what makes the roof itself worth looking at closely. Because up there, something else was happening besides survival. What kind of world did 100,000 people sleeping outdoors actually make? Here is the thing the coroner's lists cannot show you. The roof of a Ludlow Street tenement on the 8th of August 1896 was the most crowded bedroom in America, and it had rules, and neighbors, and a social order, none of which had existed in June. The family did not have a heat strategy. They had a sequence. The wet sheet went up at noon. The children went to the stoop at 5. The jug was filled at 9. The mattress went up the stairs at 10. And at the top of the stairs was everyone else's sequence, arriving at the same time: the pressers, the peddlers, the cigar makers, the widow from the second floor whose sons carried her chair up for her. Positions on the roof were not assigned, but by the third night they were settled, the same families in the same corners, the way pews settle in a church. A man learned which of his neighbors snored, which infant cried at 3, which couple murmured in Yiddish and which in Sicilian, facts that 4 years of living in the same building had never taught him. Nobody chose this. That has to be said plainly, because it is the line this channel does not cross. The roof was not charming. It was the least bad surface within walking distance of the rent they could pay. The community up there was produced by shared emergency, the way a lifeboat produces one. But it was real. The heat had taken 100 strangers stacked in a brick box and laid them out under the same sky, and for 10 nights the tenement had something it was never designed to have: a commons. 6 stories down and a few miles uptown. Meanwhile, one city official had started walking through the tenement districts at night to see all of this for himself. He was 41 days from a presidential election season, he ran the police department, and he was about to do something no New York government had done before. Who was he, and what did he decide the city owed the roof? His name was Theodore Roosevelt. In August 1896 he was 37 years old, president of the New York City Police Board, 3 years away from the governor's mansion and 5 from the White House, and for most of the wave, like the rest of the city government under Mayor William Strong, he was watching a disaster that no official playbook covered. There were no heat emergency plans. There were no cooling centers. The city's formal response for over a week was, essentially, nothing. The mayor's emergency meeting came around August 13th, as the wave was already breaking. But in the final days, the city did one thing it had never done, and Roosevelt ran it. The city bought ice, the same ice that had been rolling past the tenements all week at prices the tenements could not pay, and gave it away free, from the police precinct station houses, straight into the wards where the dying was worst. Roosevelt did not administer it from a desk. He went to the station houses and the tenement districts himself, watched the distribution, and followed families up the stairs to see what the ice meant when it arrived. What he saw stayed in his letters: rooms where the whole family was awake at midnight because sleep was not possible, infants laid on fire escapes, conditions that shocked a man who thought Jacob Riis had already shown him everything. Historians who study the wave read those August nights as part of Roosevelt's education, an early, physical lesson in what government was for, delivered one flight of tenement stairs at a time. Hold on to what the ice line at the precinct house actually was, because it is the hinge of this whole channel, the first time an American city treated coolness as something the public was owed, rather than something the market sold. It lasted a few days. Then the wave broke, the ice wagons went back to charging, and the roof went back to being the poor man's remedy. So what did August 1896 actually change, and what would it take, and how many decades, for the cold to finally come home? The wave broke around the 13th of August. The temperature fell, the roofs emptied, the mattresses came back down the stairs, and the city filed roughly 1,300 death certificates and moved on. Nothing structural changed that autumn. The tenements still had air shafts. The ice still had a price. The next heat wave would find the same city waiting. But something had been demonstrated that could not be undemonstrated. The precinct ice line had shown that the cold could be distributed as a public good, a lesson that would surface again in cooling centers and hydrant programs a century later. And 6 years after that August, in 1902, an engineer named Willis Carrier would build the first modern air conditioning system for a Brooklyn printing plant, a few miles from Ludlow Street. The machine would spend the next 50 years working its way down toward the roof, the movie theaters in the 20s, selling refrigerated air for the price of a ticket, the department stores, the office buildings, and finally, after the Second World War, the window unit, the cold, at last, arriving home, one apartment at a time. If this channel is going to keep documenting what American life in the heat was and what it meant to the people who managed it, subscribe. There are more ice wagons, more fans on more dressers, more Tuesday nights at the movies, more Sears catalogs open in October, and more window units arriving through one neighbor's window and changing what the whole floor thought about the following summer. What the roof gave the family on Ludlow Street, 10 degrees and a moving breath of air the rear bedroom was never built to provide, is exactly what the humming box in the window would one day deliver without the climb. And if your family has a summer in it, a fire escape, a rooftop, a heat wave, an iceman, put it in the comments. Did your family ever carry a mattress up to the roof, and who slept outside first? Next, the iceman, the horse, the tongs, and the trade that carried the cold up 4 flights before the machines came. The tenement at the family's address on Ludlow Street stood for decades more. Somewhere in the 1950s, a window unit went into a window on that block for the first time. The roof door stayed shut that August. The mattress stayed on the bed. The night sky over the Lower East Side held the same heat it had held in 1896, and nobody came up to meet it. The building was still there. The heat was still there. The 100 neighbors under one sky were gone, floor by floor, into the private cold. The roof had been a bedroom because it had to be. When it no longer had to be, it was just a roof.